Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 200 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined in person, as you can see on video, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans. Exciting episode here coming up.
Yes, we've been talking about this 200th episode for quite a while, and we're recording here in mid-August, so it's been a bit since our last episode. And since it was the 200th, we wanted to do something special, so I'm here visiting Dad in Michigan, and we managed to get this beautiful spot secured from one of Dad's friends here in Michigan. So we want to do something special for the 200th episode. We still may be doing our normal audio podcast for our regular episodes, but we want to do something special here. We've also gone ahead and created a YouTube channel to accommodate this new video format that we'll be doing. So you can find us at College Football Throwdown on YouTube. And we also have a new email, collegefootballthrowdown@gmail.com.
Wow, awesome.
That's right.
We're going up in the world. This is something I kind of pushed Alex into because I felt like we wanted to try this and see how it went, as I think it would be more receptive to our listeners and easier for people to find us.
That's right. So we've got to stick with our tradition here and open up a cold beverage.
Yes.
I have myself a Labatt Blue here, which is a Canadian beer I don't normally get in California.
But it's our favorite beer here in Michigan, or at least the favorite kind of standard beverage. But I'm going to be opening up a beer I've just recently discovered. It's a Keweenaw red. Let's see, it's called Red Jacket. It's just a beautiful beer from the Keweenaw Brewing Company up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I just discovered that this summer. So,
all right.
Cheers, son.
Cheers.
Okay. Boom. Happy 200.
Mm-hmm. Ah, lovely.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. So yes, not only is it our 200th episode, but those who've been listening to us for a long time will know that our very first episode was actually posted in June of 2015. So we've officially passed the 10-year anniversary of our podcast.
10 years doing this together. And now when we started, you were
just graduating
from college. So it was a way for us to kind of connect while you were still in college a little bit.
That's right. As such, obviously a lot has changed in the past 10 years, both in terms of Nebraska football and in terms of college football as a whole. So we thought, since we have this special 200th episode, and for past specials like the 100th, we did a special on the 95 Husker team and things like that. But for this one, we wanted to do a nice 10-year retrospective, look back on what both college football in Nebraska was looking like back in 2015, back when we did that first episode. Also look back at, what our intentions for the podcast were and how we've achieved those and maybe not achieved others since then.
Right, exactly. We kind of had some objectives. The first one, which was maybe the easiest one to achieve, was just to do this, not necessarily for anyone else even to consume it or listen to it, but as much just for ourselves to kind of force us to sustain our history of having conversations about Nebraska football. Having a son who grew up primarily in Michigan and being a huge Husker fan myself, this was a way that I could, share my passion for the Huskers with my son.
That's right. Back in that time, June of 2015, that was actually we were prepping for Mike Riley's first year as our head coach of Nebraska football.
Wow.
Yeah, we had just fired Bo Pelini the previous season. Unfortunately, we were optimistic about Mike Riley. Even at the time, though, we did comment on how it was an odd hire because the AD at the time, Sean Eichhorst, said that Mike Riley was the first guy he talked to, and that's who we got. But Mike Riley was coming off of a long stretch at Oregon State where he had been, moderately successful, but certainly not lit anything up. It's not like he was the hot coach of that particular year.
Right.
So there were some question marks going into it.
Oh, absolutely. And he was older. People were thinking that he was basically on the verge of retirement. And so it was a little bit of a questionable hire, but understanding the context that it was in the I guess the reflection of our previous coach, which was Bo Pelini. And if you were looking for the antithesis of Bo
Right.
Pelini, then Mike Riley would be that. So I think that there was some motivation on the part of Eichhorst to hire somebody that was not Bo Pelini.
Right. And one thing that was ironic was, you may remember on like the third episode, which was while I was still in Michigan before I left for California for my job.
Okay.
We did a podcast with your friend Brian, who's been on several times and is a major Michigan fan.
Right.
At the time, Harbaugh was also a relatively new coach.
Right.
And, he had a recent faux pas in an interview that we were talking about.
Right.
And kind of talking about how, hey, he can be as weird as he wants as long as he wins for us.
Right.
But there were actually some kind of higher expectations for Nebraska going into that year than there were for Michigan. Because
right.
you have to remember, obviously, we're coming off the Bo Pelini years, so we were coming off a 9-win season, right?
And they had just fired
Rich Rod.
No,
right?
Was it Rich Rod? No, it wasn't Rich Rod. They
Guy
had
after
they
him?
had yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to think of his name now, and I can't even think of it. But
Brady Hoke.
Brady Hoke, right?
There we go.
And he had come into Michigan and done okay, but not well enough for the Michigan faithful, right? They expected more, and so they were able to entice Harbaugh back from the professional ranks, and there was huge excitement, but they recognized that they were in a rebuild there at Michigan.
Right. Yes, and Hoke had a 5-7 record that previous 2014 year,
Right.
when he got fired,
Right.
which obviously for Michigan standards was not good enough.
Exactly.
But yeah, it was interesting. Like, also at the time, right, we had recently, the Big Ten had changed its division structure, right, to the East and the West versus the legends and the leaders from the past.
Right, because they had added Maryland and Rutgers at that point, I think.
Right, from back in 2014, they were added.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when they changed up those divisions. And as we all know, the East Division was more stacked than the West Division because they had Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn
Right.
State. At the time, we were thinking of Michigan State as one of those like top powers in the conference,
Right, exactly.
which hasn't lasted to now.
D'Antonio was a great coach and had done really great things there.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, when you end up looking at what that 2015 season ended up being, it was a 6-7 season. And we're obviously just coming off of a 7-6 season, 10 years later, right off of the 2024 season.
Exactly.
So, so much has changed, and in other ways, so little has. Isn't that right?
Exactly. Well, it's like we've been struggling in the mud, trying to figure it out, and we haven't been able to get the right coach, the right formula, and it has literally been walking through the thicks of a cranberry bog or something like that, as opposed to any kind of trajectory that would take us in a positive direction or whatever, or negative for that matter. It's just been kind of up and down, and then stayed down and little bumps after that.
Right.
So not a great deal.
Yeah. Well, as it turns out, maybe us during the podcast was not great for the world of Nebraska football because that 10-year stretch from I guess it'd be 9 years then, from 2015 to 2024 is the worst stretch of that period of time since 1962 when Bob Devaney was hired as our coach and turned things around. There were rough years before
Prior to that, right? During the 50s, we
Right.
had a rough stretch also. But yes, it certainly in any living Huskers, life cycle, right?
Right.
That we're fans. This is the worst decade that we've had in Nebraska football in a very long time. And not without effort, not without trying, and that's the thing that is so
Right.
frustrating, right? And I don't know if now is the moment to discuss that, but it could have been so much better. We were so close to these years being better than they have been, and there's just
Right.
a whole litany of reasons why that has happened. And some people maybe would listen to this podcast and say, "Well, you're just making excuses." And at the end of the day, that's correct. They are excuses because the results on the field are the results on the field. But it's pretty remarkable that the series of events could happen to the program to lead us to what has happened. But it also makes me optimistic about the future. That I think we're closer to righting the ship than maybe our decade-long malaise in the desert would suggest.
Right. Yeah. To that point, I agree with what you said kind of about like almost overcorrection, right? We had Bo, who was very consistent for us, but was not great with the media, was a bit of an asshole, would get very fired up, and we would always, he had the great, consistency, but when we lost badly, right? And that was the thing we were really hoping to fix. And we thought Mike Riley, as this older coach with a ton of experience, very much more low key, much more kind, would be a breath of fresh air after the years of Bo. But as it turns out, he was too low key, right? We kind of got soft under the Riley years.
That's true.
He wasn't as great at recruiting and things of that nature.
Actually, he was fabulous at recruiting, but because we couldn't win, a lot of the recruits didn't stay with us.
Right.
I mean, there were a couple of recruiting classes during that thing. You may recall the term Calibraska. Which was an invention of the Riley era, and we had some tremendous talent that we were expecting to sign, but then most of them all decommitted and ended up going elsewhere. Some stayed committed in Nebraska, but most did not, and so Riley was actually reasonably effective at getting interest in Nebraska. The problem was the product on the field didn't elicit, the kind of confidence in those athletes to stay committed, right? And the other thing was, it wasn't just his fault. The upper administration at the university, the president and the athletic director, were also a mess at that point in the Nebraska era. More so than even we realized when we were doing our podcast. We probably spoke less about the absolute disaster that was going on in Steve Eichhorst's athletic department, and even at the president level of the university, that we maybe didn't have as much visibility to. Yeah,
right. Well, because then, so we have the 3 years of Mike Riley, which went 6-7 the first year, right? Then 9-4 in 2016,
and we started 7-0 that year, I think. Is that right?
No, that was the year where we started off 7-0, and it seemed like things were turning
around.
Maybe
it was turning around. Maybe this Riley was going to work.
Right, and then 4-8 the following year, which I also take that, that 2016 year was kind of last year. Mike still had some of Bo's recruits and stuff, right?
Well, there was that
third year,
but he was gonna make hay with a great recruiting class in that next year. But then the wheels fell off
after
and
the 7-0
then everybody
start.
Decommitted.
Right?
No, it was the following year, the 4 and whatever year.
Oh, 4-8 year.
Yeah, 4-8 year. That was the year where we had a tremendous recruiting class, and then it fell off because we stumbled and did not do well.
Right, and
it was obvious that he had lost the team. There were some internal issues with leadership on the team. He had some issues with leadership. I think the structure of the athletic department was undermining him, was not giving him the authority that he needed, and he wasn't demanding it. So he was behaving like a guy that had one foot out the door, and I think that helped accelerate his demise.
Right. So then we kind of almost overcorrect again, where we go with a very young coach in Scott Frost, who admittedly just came off of his 13-0 perfect season with UCF, and he was the hot coach at the time.
Right.
But, very much the opposite of Mike, right? Like not as fiery as Bo, but more so than Mike, and a young coach with, fresh ideas and could get out there on a recruiting trail in a way that Mike maybe couldn't.
Yeah. And Scott Frost should have been a success for Nebraska football. I mean, that should have been a slam dunk successful hire, except for one thing. Scott had success as a head coach and is a good head coach. I think we will see this in the coming years. As we talk on this podcast, Scott is embarking on his first season in his return stint at University of Central Florida, and I have every expectation that Scott's going to do well there. It was more about the pressure cooker of being in his home state, about the fact that I think it's apparent now in hindsight that he really didn't want the job, and that he probably kind of felt a little forced into taking it because he was the hometown savior kind of thing, the prodigal son, whatever. But he didn't he didn't really he wasn't ready to embrace the intensity of coverage, both positive and negative, that comes with the territory of being involved with Nebraska football, because even on the scale of college versus pro, we've had some coaches that had some pro experience, and they come to Nebraska and they're like, the amount of media scrutiny that exists in Lincoln, Nebraska for this football team and around this state is unique. I mean, Green Bay Packers of the NFL, Dallas Cowboys, maybe the New York teams are similar, but even within the Big Ten Conference, even while we've struggled in this last 10 years, we still have as much or more media at media days and scrutinizing our fans, our team through the fan base, as teams that have won multiple national championships like Ohio State or Georgia or Michigan or whatever. I mean, we have more intensity than they do, even though we have had the 10 worst years of the last 60.
Right.
So, that's crazy, right? That's nuts.
Yes.
But that's just the reality, and Scott wasn't ready for that.
Yep. But, and this might be a hot take, especially given some of Scott's recent comments to the media and everything. Okay. But I actually feel like even though Scott's record was worse than Mike's as it all played out, I actually think the 3 Mike Riley years maybe did more damage to the program than the Scott years, because I felt like that mentality thing and weakness and softness that I mentioned, I really remember that being so evident in that 2018 period when things really fell apart, and how Scott came in, and there were some people who didn't believe in Scott, and didn't buy into what he was doing, and he had to fight that for the first 2 years of his time here. And I felt like we did get better with our strength and conditioning and the mentality of the team, even though we were losing a lot of these 1-score games still, which remains a problem that we're still trying to fight through to this day. But I felt like we were still making steps during Scott Frost, and we were so close to having successful seasons, it felt like. Right. Do you agree with that?
Well, I would not completely. My argument would be that during the Frost era, he could have done. He could have made some basic, fundamental leadership decisions, right? Both in terms of how he behaved and how he led the team, but also in terms of how he selected his assistants and things of that nature.
Bringing back his whole staff from UCF.
Right. And things like that might have helped him work through that process more effectively. But there's no doubt in my mind that he inherited a team that had a bad locker room, that had a horrible culture, and that he had to try to rebuild. And rather than blowing it up, he tried to take what he had and work with it and evolve it over time. And in doing that, he had a degree of success, but there was always a weakness here or there that would cause us to lose games. And that's where that losing the close games, losing too many of those 1-score type games led to the pressure cooker that Scott then ultimately couldn't handle, and then his personal life and his personal situation deteriorated because he was unhappy with that situation.
Right, yeah. It seems like, especially now that he's back in Central Florida and stuff, he just likes that lifestyle clearly better than the Nebraska lifestyle, I think.
Right.
From just a personal perspective. But
right.
For those who need a reminder, the Scott Frost years, we were 4-8, 5-7 in 2019, then 3-5 in the weird COVID year, 2020, then 3-9, 2021, and 2022, 4-8, with obviously Scott being fired midway through the season.
Exactly.
just a couple games before his contract would have reset to a lower buyout, as you
Right.
recall.
Yes.
But our AD chose to fire him at that point that we did right after we lost to Georgia Southern.
Well,
I believe
exactly.
it
I was just going to say we had just lost to an FCS school, and
Yeah.
he couldn't take it.
Yeah.
He couldn't. The implication was a couple $1 million, and I think the AD just looked at it and said, "I need to fire this guy now so I can begin the process of finding the right guy, finding the replacement that I believe in, because
Right.
what I have now I don't believe in."
Right. But what's interesting to me and what's so sad about the Scott situation, because it could have been so good, is that, we did talk about Scott at least a little bit when Mike Riley was hired, because, Scott was
He was already
a great offensive coordinator.
great offensive coordinator at Oregon.
Right. But he hadn't had any proven head coaching experience at all then. So at that time, it felt too risky.
Right.
But it felt
Too
like
early.
we did the 3 years with Mike. Scott did his 3 years at UCF.
Yep.
That third year, he had amazing success. He was the hot coach on the market.
Right.
So it seemed like a no-brainer at the time. Like
absolutely.
he evolved. He was ready for the big leagues now.
If we had chosen anybody but Scott, Nebraska fans would
been
have
livid.
cost our athletic director his job right at that moment. If he had gotten anybody other than Scott overall, collectively, there were certainly some Scott Frost doubters. I'm not saying there were not, but bottom line, Nebraska fans collectively would have been greatly disappointed to not get basically the hottest head coaching
or at
candidate.
the very least, he needed to go after Scott aggressively and at least be able to say, "Hey guys, I tried, but somebody else came in with a better offer."
Right, exactly.
You know.
Exactly. And Scott did have, I mean, he had genuine interest from the University of Florida and some other premier programs. But I think Scott did see that, the opportunity presented itself for him to have this, I mean, absolutely storybook situation. And he was coming in with less pressure because we had already been underperforming for 5 or 6 years. I mean, going back to the Bo Pelini years, the latter Bo Pelini years, the post
Big Ten.
Well, I was going to say the post Ndamukong Suh years of Bo Pelini, where his defensive concepts worked so well when he had effectively a generational defensive tackle and some other amazing defensive tackles.
And when his new system was new and people
fairly
had
new.
not adjusted to it.
Correct.
He was ahead of the curve for a while.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, so one fun thing is I went back and listened to some of our older podcasts, the big ones. So episode 1, the third episode I mentioned. Also went back to the one where we hired Scott and Mike Riley was fired and stuff. And you did list a few coaches that you would have been okay with besides Scott, actually, at the time.
Yes.
So I want to run some of those by you now.
Okay. Oh boy, here we go.
Yep. So Dan Mullen was one. Who obviously went on to be the coach of Florida for 4 seasons before he got fired.
Right, and Dan was coach at Iowa State prior to Florida and had done very well there.
You also brought up Herm Edwards from Arizona State and Pat Narduzzi from Pitt.
Gotcha. So, and they were all, Narduzzi was a defensive coordinator at Michigan State and was an underling of D'Antonio, who I have great respect for, and so I felt like Narduzzi had a chance to do some really special things, and so he was a hot candidate on that recruiting or that coaching cycle.
Right, the carousel.
And Dan Mullen, of course, was also hot. And then the third one I've already forgotten.
Herm Edwards.
Herm Edwards, that's a huge mistake for me. But he was coming out of the studio. This is a guy who had been an NFL head coach, had then gone into the studio and was a very popular studio personality, evaluating NFL teams, but was super dynamic personality, right? He went down there and to Arizona State, and I thought he would do pretty well there because of his history. I'm trying to think if he was Indianapolis Colts, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Right. Bottom line is he was awful. I mean, awful.
Right.
Dan Mullen ran into the buzzsaw that was an SEC power like Florida. I think Dan Mullen is a very good football coach.
Well, I went back to look at some of his stuff after I re-listened to that podcast, and the general consensus was he had a great offensive system, but he was terrible on defense. And the coach he hired a defensive coordinator who was doing badly, and he chose to stick with him into the following season, and then fired him midway through because it was going so poorly. So that was his major problem.
Yep. Well, and that's the problem with a lot of coaches is they really want to and desire to have loyalty to their assistants because they understand that if your assistants are always looking over their shoulder because they think you're one day away from firing them,
right?
That keeps them from being fully committed to what the team's vision is, right? So you have to show a level of commitment to your staff regardless. Once you've chosen them, you got to ride with the horse that came to town with you, that brung you.
Yep.
So I get why coaches do that, but at some point you have to recognize when your own future and career is at stake, and when you do that, you got to be willing to have the honest assessment and move in a different direction.
Right. And one fun thing, we were talking about a variety of national topics as well in those early episodes, and one was talking about the East versus the West, right, with that new division set up. And was Nebraska better off being in the weaker West versus the tougher East? And I think we would look back on it now and say, well, we were definitely better off there because our record would have been even worse if we were
absolutely.
in the East with all those dogs.
Absolutely. I actually love the division of leaders and legends. I thought it was much more equitable.
Right.
But people hated the names and all that sort of stuff. So then when we added more teams to the Big Ten and we went to the East-West thing, then I felt it was more unbalanced, but in our favor. Right. And so I thought that could lead to some good things for us where we would win this Western Division. But we happened to be doing that during a time when we were continuing to struggle with our leadership and our coaching carousel that we've been talking about, and that was during a time when Wisconsin was elite really within the Big Ten, and Iowa was also very consistently good, and Minnesota had transitioned through a couple of coaches, but had continued to be consistently good. Right. Never great, but consistently good. And we were swinging for the fence and missing. Right, like we were hitting a bunch of long foul balls and that sort of stuff with some of the efforts that we were making throughout this recruiting at a level that should have put us at the top of that Western Division or very close to it, and yet the results on the field did not reflect that.
Right. Yep, and you actually did some helpful digging for us because we're all aware of the one-score games, right, which we've had so many of that didn't go our way this past 10 years. And a lot of that was due to, turnovers, right? That was an issue that really popped up during Scott Frost's time where we were just turnover-prone like crazy.
Yes.
So you went back and crunched some numbers and found that over the past... Since from 2015 to 2024.
So while we've been doing this podcast.
Right, the past 9 years, we lost 45 of those games and won 14.
So effectively in a 60 games where we were in one score type environments for the game. So we were competitive. We were within striking distance of winning a football game. And we were 14-45. I mean, that statistic, I mean, that in a nutshell summarizes where Nebraska as a football team has been over the last decade. Pretty darn close, but not quite there. And then finding a way to shoot yourself in the foot. And yes, the turnover thing, we could spend the rest of the podcast talking about the turnovers, but there was more than that. It was about execution. It was about penalties and just atrocious special teams or kicking game play where we just allowed ourselves to get punts blocked and field goals not made, and all those kinds of circumstances that would have led to victories if we had been able to execute in those areas. And again, that's kind of all undersell for something that Tom Osborne used to talk about all the time in the years that he was our head coach, and that is that, he had incredible staff stability, and he really, really emphasized how important that was to his ability to sustain success. And he's like, hey, one of the reasons that I'm able to be successful is because I have a bunch of coaches that have stayed with me. They haven't advanced their careers and chased a head coaching job. They've chosen to stay at Nebraska because they were taken care of. They were paid what they felt was a reasonable wage. They had access to great athletes with great facilities to train and prepare those athletes. And as a result, their communications, all the internal systems of that program could be fine-tuned because of all that continuity. And now you look at Nebraska, and we are the opposite of continuity. And part of that is the culture of our fan base has
and the evolution of college football in general.
Right, exactly. Has squeezed the time frames. Now coaches they get 2.5, maybe 3 years. If you are not trending in the right direction after 3 years, it's a problem. I mean, right. People don't talk about our current coach, Matt Rule, being on the hot seat, and I don't believe he is, because I think his athletic director really is fond of him and believes he is moving us in the right direction. But that attitude might change dramatically if all of a sudden a bunch of the major donors were very unhappy after Nebraska goes and lays an egg this season and does another 4-7 or
right.
4-8 kind of season, and just looks horrible doing it, and the execution is bad, and the internal systems fall apart and things like that. You know what? There might be a lot of demand for him to get fired, right?
Well,
you're in year 3.
In our case, though, right? Because even though Scott Frost, turned out so bad as an experiment, yet we gave him 4.5 years, right?
Right.
There was calls for him to be fired at that year
the
4
point.
Yep. And we chose to stick with him, right? We gave him that extra time. We gave him some
to try to turn
slack
around
because of the 2020, right? Was the COVID year. That was a weird.
That is weird. And he tried. I got to give Scott credit in that. He tried to make that year happen as much as any coach in the Big Ten. He really wanted to play, and yet we still were miserable during that, right? So it didn't translate to us being successful.
Yeah, so you give him that one, but that's still then 3 more normal years of disappointment, and then going to the 5th year where, once again, we lost to Georgia Southern. And
when I believe that was the year we went to Ireland for the Ireland game, and should have won that game. Absolutely were the better team than a Northwestern team that struggled. And we found a way to give that game away. And if you'll recall, there was a critical coach's decision that happened during that game, which I remember being in that stadium, Aer Lingus Stadium in Dublin.
That was Northwestern. And we lost 31-28.
31-28. And we were ahead at halftime. I think we were ahead like 9, maybe 10 points.
Right.
And we did an onside kick.
Oh, yes, I remember.
And it was, coaching decisions like that, poor execution of special teams play that just, pull my eyeballs out. That would be less painful than watching what I watched.
Yes. Oh, yes. Good times.
One of the only, I'll sidebar here for just a brief moment to talk about the fact that we were at that game. One of the great things about that game was that their electronic systems, they did not take cash in the stadium there, and their electronic systems crashed. And so rather than, doing nothing or shutting down the vendors or whatever, they just decided to give everything away.
Free beer.
So they gave us free beer and I think even free food that was available for a good portion of the second to half, or maybe it was the second quarter and part of the third quarter. I don't remember the exact extent of how long it went, but it was a zoo.
Yeah, the Irish fans who were neutral were like, "This is the best sport of all time."
Great. Yeah, this is so awesome. And I'll never forget the next day we were riding in a taxi, my brother and I, and we're talking to him about this, and he wanted to clarify if that really was true or not. And we said, yep, it was. And he says, I can't believe you Yankees come over here and you get a drink for free in our stadium. He was livid that they had allowed that. He says, I've been going to, soccer games, right? Football, their football for years, and there ain't no way they would ever give us free beer. But you guys come over here and you get free beer, and he was not a happy camper. It was hilarious. I mean, he was doing it kind of tongue in cheek, but it was funny.
That is funny. Well, hey, they wanted teams to come back, and they're still doing the Ireland game.
That's like the 28th or 29th of this year.
Yeah. But I crunched some quick numbers there. So out of those 59 games we mentioned, right, 14 of them we won, 45 we lost. That's a 76% loss.
Losing percentage. Right. Yeah.
So 3 out of 4 times, if it's a close game going to the fourth quarter, Nebraska's going to lose.
Right. We won 24% of
including
games.
One year in the Scott Frost era where we went 0-8.
Right.
8 losses in a row.
And some of those were overtimes, and I mean just crazy, painful, ridiculous ways to lose football games.
Yes.
And it's what led to, the pressure cooker that Scott got himself into, because you just can't lose that many games.
Yeah.
That's systemic.
Definitely. But of course, we do have the positivity, right? We have Matt Rule now, who started off 5-7, right? Then 7-6. We won our bowl game. We went to a bowl game. We won a bowl game, which was a major goal of ours last year.
The season, yep.
So to your point, I don't feel like he's on the hot seat.
No,
I feel like people like him in Nebraska.
Yes.
He's got the right mentality and all that.
Yes.
But it would definitely be a problem if we took a step back, if we got less than 7-6 this year.
I would agree. I think that all the signs point to positive results, right?
Right.
Like the talent level on our team is better than it's been in a long time, I believe. Collectively, we obviously have some areas, some gaps, some areas where we're not as talented, but overall, we're a better team. I think our staff, our coaching staff, is a more formidable staff collectively. Now, that's not to say that losing White as the DC last year wasn't a loss. That guy was
right.
a good coordinator, and I have no idea how our new coordination is going to go with John Butler. Now, I have no reason to believe that John's not a talented coach, and he has a history of that. But until he puts it on film, I'm not can't say for sure. But between the talent and the culture and all the things we've tried to do in terms of recovery for our athletes, all the things that you would do to maximize their ability to perform at a high level, it's all in place. And so, at some point you have to be able to just accept that that's where we're at, and let's go out and execute. So the expectation is there. He knows he has to win. His athletic director, Dannon, has all but said, it's time to win. We've done everything. We've spent the money to buy you some portal athletes. We've spent the money to put you into the best facilities that money can buy. So let's do it.
Yep. So the good news is that I feel like we're trending in a better direction than we were with Riley or with Scott.
Agree.
So we're hoping that this is the year. We'll talk about this on our next podcast. But with Temple and Baylor, Matt Rule's past 2 college stops, the third year was the year where he really had that breakout success.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to see something similar with Nebraska. I even saw there's some crazy folks out there doing their preseason predictions who even said we have what would you say, a dark horse chance of making it into the playoff, the 12-team playoff and stuff like that, which would obviously be amazing, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, as Husker fans, we're now we've become. It's common to say that we win the off season. We've got 9 national championships, off-season national championships in a row.
Drinking the
Kool-Aid, baby. But and I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I'm saying that people that are saying that, it is true. It's possible. We have enough talent that we could find ourselves in the mix. Heck, all you have to do is look back to last season and recognize that if we had decent system execution
better
and our special teams, we might very well have won 10 games instead of only 7. right? And that would have put us right in the thick of things. And we don't get into the playoff, but we're right there in the conversation maybe until quite late, right? Including a victory over the eventual national champion. I mean, if we execute, we beat Ohio State at Ohio State last year.
Right.
I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah.
So the ingredients are all there. I mean, the recipe has been off, but the ingredients are there for us to have a pretty high level of success.
And that was true even in the Mike Riley and Scott Frost eras, where we'd be, some of those one-score games would be against really good teams. For example, I'm looking here at our 2015 schedule. Fans will remember the crazy win over Michigan State, who was ranked 7th that year, 39-38, like rainy game, very crazy. And then we went and played against number 4 Iowa. That was where Iowa was having a great season.
Year,
and we lost them, but it was only 28-20.
Right. Right.
So,
exactly.
We've had the frustrating part is that we've had those one-score games where we're looking really good, and then we lose against a top team like an Ohio State or a Michigan, and then we do the same against Minnesota or Maryland or Rutgers or something,
and we just stumble and fumble our way to a loss.
Right.
Yeah. And so until we overcome that Achilles heel, people can't be fully optimistic and ready to embrace what. But as coaches go, Matt Rule has, I think, made an incredibly high percentage of the right decisions. Right, like any coach that has to make 150 decisions every day for his program, Matt Rule is swinging high, man. He is hitting at a high percentage, and I think over time and that's where the 3-year thing really comes in. The record thing, and he gets the 9 wins in his 3rd year and all that. That's less important to me. What's more important is that what is demonstrable in all of his previous 2 stops in the college ranks and his stop here is that we are culturally and structurally and talent-wise a way better football team today, collectively, than we were 2 years ago.
Right.
And so going into this 3rd year, he has absolutely put us in a better spot. And I think he did that absolutely at Baylor and
the turnover margins have gotten much better compared to where they were, at the end of Scott's tenure and that kind of thing.
So reasonable Husker fans, I think, can have the conversation and say, yeah, I think we're going to be better. But we can also say, I'm looking at the schedule, and the schedule is very favorable for us. I mean, effectively, with the first game of this coming season being a quote neutral site game in a place where there's probably going to be 45 or 50,000 Nebraska fans, not a neutral game. That is not a home game, but it's as close as you can get. And because we're on the 5-4 side, we're on the 5 side of the 5-4 split of 9 Big Ten conference games, we have a very favorable schedule. And we have to take advantage of that.
More home games.
But on the other side of that, we got to play a Minnesota team that has our number and has just found ways to beat us year in and year out.
Right.
And we got to play them up there, in Minnesota, I think on a Friday night, right? We have to.
And we've got Penn State on our schedule in a year where they're looking really good.
And we're playing them at their place. And it's going to probably be a whiteout game at night or whatever. And we've got some weird situations where we have to travel on short weeks to the coast, right, to Maryland or out to UCLA, and stuff like that, and then come back to play Iowa. We're going to get to play Iowa at home, but do we get them at night? No, we get them in the middle of the day at 11 a.m. instead of a later game on a Friday. So not everything is perfect, but the fact is it's about as good as you could expect. So as Husker fans, we have to embrace that, and our team has to step up and perform. I mean, at the end of the day, Coach and his staff and the players have collectively got to find that path to execution that allows them and their athleticism to show itself, and then we'll be fine.
Yep. All right, and then just one last thing to kind of wrap up this special 200th episode is we've kind of talked about the Nebraska side of these past 10 years, but we also wanted to talk about the national side of these past 10 years, because we've obviously been covering the national side of things as well. One fun thing listening back to that first episode was we kind of talked a bit more about talking about Nebraska, talking about the conference, and talking about the national world of college football. And I feel like we've incorporated that conference talk into the national talk. We haven't really made that its own separate category necessarily. Also, you had brought up the idea of doing the throwdowns more often, where it'd be, debate like what's the best punt return of all time, and we bring our separate examples, and we debate which was the best.
The Johnny Rogers one, or one of the ones from some of Michigan's great, the kick six. Right.
That's not a punt return.
It's not, but just returns of that nature. You could have some fun, debatable kind of conversations about that. But we never quite got around to that, and partially because when we would talk college football, we were so engaged in whatever was going on at that time. The frequency or the recency bias would draw us into that, and then there just wasn't time. It's almost like the throwdown comparison aspect would be a totally separate podcast.
Right. Well, and we did some of that, like with the special episode, like the 95 Huskers. I brought up the whole, were they actually the best team of all time? And I brought up some of the other popular examples. We debated it, quote unquote, in a very biased way because
we're Nebraska fans.
We're Nebraska fans, of course. But like you say, I mean, you're the one who's saying that our podcasts are too long as they are, so to add a whole other discussion segment maybe wasn't the best idea.
We would have to do a midweek podcast that was specifically about a throwdown.
Yeah, and he could edit them instead of me.
Yeah.
But we did do the beer cracking on the very first episodes. We've kept that up as our tradition this whole time.
Yes.
But yeah, it was kind of fun listening back to that one, just hearing about what the kind of topics were in the national world. 2015 was the second year of the playoff, so we were still in the early stages of that. Maryland, Rutgers, and Louisville all did some conference realignment in 2014. So that was kind of in the rearview mirror. And for most of the time we've been doing the podcast, the conferences stayed the same up until that 2022-2023 period where everything got shaken up in a major way.
Right.
Before that, things were pretty calm.
Right.
What we were talking about at the time was satellite camps, early visits for players, oversigning and recruiting, 9 conference games, of course.
Yep.
Some things never change in that regard.
Right. That's true.
Media bias from ESPN, proposal for an early signing day, that hadn't actually been implemented yet. So,
Well, and that's the thing is that through those years of running this podcast or doing this podcast, we have had, some intense discussions. I've gone on some crazy rants. It's been a lot of fun, but it's the kind of thing that we would have done even when Alex was a young boy and we were sitting around the living room watching football on a football Saturday, or maybe because I had to work on Saturday, we'd be watching it on Sunday, and reviewing the game kind of post performance.
Right.
But regardless, it was something that always connected Alex and I together and allowed us to kind of have a little bit of a shared bond, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
There's been some times when you've been calling me because you were West Coast and I was on Eastern time zone where, because it was after work for you and it was 10:30, 11:30 at night, and I'm practically falling asleep on the podcast. So that happened.
Well, but thankfully Nebraska is one of those things that he can get energetic about almost any time.
Almost.
So that helps for sure. But yeah, it is kind of funny though, just listening back to some of those older topics that we did and how kind of quaint they are in comparison to, like the full roster sizes we have now and just paying players outright, kind of being worried about, if satellite camps are permissible or not, and things like that, right? Exactly. Things have changed so much in that regard.
They have. And that's the thing is that so many things are kind of in these Wild West times are kind of out of control or don't have guardrails at all. And so that's a concern that's been consistently expressed on our podcast was, our love for the game continues, but But a lot of the decisions and the direction that the game has taken over this 10 years have not been ones that I would say I agreed with or wanted to see happen. But it is what it is. The sport on Saturday this past year, being able to go to a couple of key games. We were there for the 400th consecutive sellout in Memorial Stadium with some of my good friends, and had a great tailgate experience and everything. And just experiencing that environment. There's still nothing like a college football Saturday, particularly in Lincoln, of course. But that's there are countless other colleges that have similar environments. Well, not countless, but there are a lot, and that's what makes college football so special.
Yep. Despite all the changes that have made it, less about the student athlete than it was in the past. There's still a passion of the fans, that you don't get in pro football.
Correct.
And those are the things that still draw me to it. Your allegiance to your college versus to a pro team or to a city, things like that.
Right.
And there are even some stats that would suggest that, college football is doing well, right, in terms of the money that's being generated by it. Clearly, we know that has all gone up in recent years.
Right.
And ESPN actually scored their most watched season since 2016 in 2024 with an average of 1.9 viewers across all their Nielsen rated networks. So
1.9 million.
Right. So that includes the main ESPN as well as like ESPN2 and U and this.
Right.
So that just shows that your average college football game is still getting good numbers, still incentivizing people to buy cable packages to be able to keep up with live sports and things like that, as you're well aware of.
Exactly. The live sport thing is, that has become the last bastion of advertisers. Because it's the only thing that where you can secure people's attention, right? Because of that passion, that commitment to the sport, and it really does oftentimes originate not with an individual athlete or a pro team, but with their tie to a university because they're an alumnus, because they live in the state and they grew up listening to the game on the radio and now watching on TV. Those kind of connections are what really lead this this sport to its success. Going forward, the concerns are some of those bonds going to be broken by the realization of these are now paid athletes, and are people going to hold them to different standards and frankly have a little bit more of a calloused attitude towards the athletes because of the fact that these guys are now driving around in fancy cars, $60,000 SUVs, $80,000 SUVs, things like that. It's a different deal. When they want to get away from it all, they can fly to, Hawaii or exactly, Cabo, because they can afford it.
Right. Yeah, and I do wonder, those things that I think separate the college game from the pro game. Will those survive into the future? Like when I have kids,
right.
Would that passion still be there, or would it just be like, why would I watch college if it's also basically pro play because they're being paid when the NFL is objectively a higher quality product in terms of the results on the field and things like that.
Right.
So yeah, remains to be seen there, but we'll talk about it once again in our next episode. But there are some great games in week 1 of college football, even beyond the Nebraska game that I'm looking forward to seeing.
Right.
So, I still enjoy watching it, even if it's crazy to do. What can you say?
Exactly. Well, and I think now, here's the great news, Alex. We've just survived the 10 worst years of Nebraska football.
That's right.
And now it's going to get better.
So the next 200 episodes of College Football Throwdown,
awesome.
Much better.
Yes.
That's what we're promising here.
That's right.
So Matt Rule, you better deliver, okay?
That's right.
All right. Well, we hope you all enjoyed this special episode, this 200th episode of College Football Throwdown. We'll be here hopefully for another 10 years of doing the podcast.
There you go.
And covering all the things going on in the Nebraska world. We'll be doing another episode talking about more specifics related to that and giving predictions for the season. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can email us at collegefootballthrowdown@gmail.com at our new email address. You can also subscribe to our YouTube now at College Football Throwdown, or you can go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify where the audio versions will be posted if you prefer viewing it that way. You can leave us some ratings or reviews or comments. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. Let us know what your favorite moment was from these past 200 episodes of College Football Throwdown, any particularly great moments. So thank you out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red!
Go Big Red!